This presentation today is about cooking your way to a healthy heart, and we created this in honor of National Heart Health Month, February. So to give you some real tips and ideas about how you can cook, because perhaps you like to cook, but to do so in a little bit more of a healthy way so that we can protect our hearts and keep them very, very strong. So today I am presenting with my colleague. So Rachel Tansey is the Family and Community Health Sciences educator in Monmouth County. And I am Joanne Kinsey, Family and Community Health Sciences educator in Atlantic and Ocean counties. So we welcome you. If you have questions, we will have a Q&A at the end of the session. So feel free to ask questions at the end, and you will probably be able to put them in the chat as well. So to get started, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel.
Thank you. As Joanne's mentioned, we are sort of doing this program in honor of Heart Health Month, and with cardiovascular disease being the #1 killer for women, and it's not too far off for men, we really wanted to kind of talk about some of the healthy habits that we could be doing to better ourselves, not only just our heart, but obviously it will benefit our whole body. And it's just sort of give you some tips and some tricks that might just help, little, baby steps that you can be making and changes that you could do that really just will better your health and improve your lifestyle for the long run. So for starters, one of the things that you really want to look at is your food and your portions of food. It is one thing to have a serving of food versus a portion of food. We really are trying to look for smaller portions so that we're not overindulging. And of those portions, I'm going to tell everybody, sure, if you want to have extra fruits and vegetables, by all means, have extra fruits and vegetables. Don't maybe do more of the saturated fats and things like that. So we're going to go through that in a little bit more detail, but it's really important to make sure we're looking at our diet as a whole and everything we're eating from morning till night so that you can understand which things maybe need to be tweaked or changed so that we can make those small changes to benefit in the long run. And we'll also go over the things that we're going to limit as well. So here is an example of what essentially an adult 2,000 calorie diet should entail, amongst other things, but these are the generally what you should have throughout the day versus even a child's 1,800 calorie diet. If you look at the difference, there's really not much. The only difference is that a child should have a little bit more fruit and a little bit more meat, just because they're growing and their bodies are ever changing and their muscles are developing and things like that. But ultimately, we're looking at a very healthy, well-rounded diet for everyone. No matter their age, we really are looking for portions that are smaller, maybe for a child versus an adult. But these are the essential foods: fruits, vegetables, dairy, proteins. And when we say meats, we mean lean proteins, not necessarily, a ribeye steak with all the grizzle on the side. But we want to have those healthier foods, including our grains, to be whole grains when we can, so that it gives us the healthier options that we're looking for. So as I was mentioning, some of the foods we want to limit. These are the foods that are not heart healthy. Saturated fats, they are typically solid at room temperature. So butters, the fat on the side of your meats, like the bacon in the picture there, that fat is typically solid. And even some of our fruits, like the tropical fats, like coconut and things like that. Those are the saturated fats that are unhealthy. They are the ones that will typically clog your arteries and not, bode well for a healthy heart in the long run. We also have our hydrogenated and trans fats, which are more versatile in when it comes to baking and products for, I often say, for a longer shelf life. If it can live on your shelf for a long time, probably not so healthy for you. We really are looking for more of those fresh foods. And when we're having these chips and baked goods and cookies and any fried foods, they're not the healthier fats that we should be including in our diet. There are definitely fats that are healthy for us: polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, things like avocados and a lot of our olive oils and things like that. Those are healthier for us. But these that are typically used in cookies and baked products are not. So our cholesterol is something that we kind of have to walk a fine line with. Yes, eggs are healthy for us, but too many of good thing are unhealthy for us. So seafood and, shrimp, squid, healthy for us, but too much of it will not be. So we have to kind of limit it to about 300 milligrams per day. And that really might be something we're not too familiar with on trying to figure out how much, cholesterol is in our foods, but that's where we really have to get the experience in reading our food labels and making sure that, this day and age, we have every device out there that we can look up how much maybe cholesterol is in an item or, an organ meat or something of the sort, so that you know where you need to limit it or not limit it. I don't think these are foods other than maybe eggs, but these are not foods that typically everyone eats every single day. So it's good to have fish 2 to 3 times a week, but we're talking, you really should make it a variety of fish. So even thin fish, the tilapia or salmon or tuna, all of those are healthier fishes over higher cholesterol fishes. Eggs are not necessarily a bad thing, but as I mentioned, in limitation, we don't want to overconsume these items either. And I'm pretty sure it's well known that refined carbohydrates and sugars are not healthy for us either. So anything along the sugary dessert line, I'm not saying that everybody doesn't have that, but everything in moderation. So, even a 12-ounce can of soda, it's often, misunderstood how much sugar is really in there. That could essentially have, teaspoons and teaspoons of sugar. So I often try to, make a joke with our younger audiences. Would they go home and eat a bowl of sugar, a spoonful of sugar? And of course they're like, yes, I would. But, typically speaking, we don't really just eat sugar by the spoonful. However, regular soda beverages with full sugars do actually have quite a bit of sugar in them. So, if it's something that really pleases your palate, maybe you look for the diet or the low sugar versions, or even just seltzers or something like that for that bubbly sensation. And as I mentioned, the sugary desserts we know are not necessarily healthy for us. So have those in moderation as well. Maybe not every day, or pick an option that is a little bit less sugar, less refined carbohydrates might be a healthier option as well. So where can we start with our heart healthy habits? We really want to make sure we're increasing our soluble fiber. Fiber that is soluble is actually bound by water, and it makes the waters that are in our bodies, and it makes the fiber move more slowly through the digestive tract. So that actually in turn makes you feel full longer and is a healthier way to digest your foods, different fruits and vegetables and whole grains. So it's a better way to make sure that your heart is getting the nutrients that it needs in order to be its optimal health as well. Eating more vegetable proteins is always important, and beans are best of all because they are very low in cholesterol, they're very high in fiber, and also very high in protein. So it's the middle of the winter here, and clearly we're going through a snowstorm. So, a good pot of chili maybe with some beans is a great way. You can make a hummus dip with beans. That is a good little dip to have to increase your fiber. In our house, we even make brownies with beans. So again, everything in moderation. We do get our brownies, but we include some black beans in there to get a little extra fiber and protein in them as well. Make sure as you're eating your animal proteins, whether it be chicken, poultry, red meats, any pork or anything, any animal proteins you're eating, really look for the lean cuts. You really want as least amount of fat on those products as possible. In your dairy products, we're looking for low fat or non-fat. So, 2% is better than whole milk. However, 1% and skim are the better options for milk products. If you're looking for yogurt, look for low fat and things like that. And when you are consuming fats and oils, we realize these are part of our diet, but it doesn't have to be the consuming, high amounts of fats and oils. So we want to make sure that we're having and using those sparingly, only just using what we need for the cooking process and things like that. So Joanne, I think we're going to turn over to you to talk a little bit. Oh, no. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about the heart healthy meals, planning your meals in advance, trying to, as I mentioned, keep reasonable portions. And if you're going to have second servings, keep them small. Takes about 20 minutes for your brain to get the message that you've been eating, and your stomach may still be thinking it's hungry, 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 but you give yourself about 20 minutes, maybe a glass of water, and you'll realize you're probably not as hungry as you once thought you were because your brain finally got the message. So including more fruits and vegetables is always important, and preparing those lower fat meals, like I said, with the lower amount of saturated fats, lower amounts of oils and things like that. There's different ways to season things and have lots of spices going on instead of seasoning it with fats and oils. And again, we mentioned limiting added sugars as well, so that we can really get the satisfaction maybe from a bowl of fruit with a little bit of yogurt as opposed to a big full fat bowl of ice cream, which I realize isn't always the same. However, in limitation and moderating how much we're having is important as well. So now I'm going to turn it to you, Joanne, and talk about the Mediterranean lifestyle.
Okay, one of my favorite topics to talk about is the Mediterranean diet and lifestyle. And you may have participated in that program in the past with us one way or the other. But anyway, why is that so important? And why does that Mediterranean diet and lifestyle get so much press? Well, it's really pretty simple. It is a very healthy way of living. And that includes the way that they eat their food, prepare their food. They focus very much on local foods. Where possible, they may even grow some of their own food. And of course, the climate is good for that too, when we're talking in the Mediterranean area. But food is more local. It's more fresh. It may be coming from the sea. Obviously, they have a super rich sea right there, filled with lots of healthy fish. But another part that's so important, there's two other parts really, the activity that they get. The people that live in that part of the world tend to get a lot of physical activity. They may or may not even have cars to drive. They may live in a very hilly or mountainous area. They often walk wherever they can. Especially if they're living near a small village or a community where they can get some of the provisions they need. So they tend to be much more active than we are in our country. So there's one of the lessons that we can take with us as we move forward, is being a little bit more physically active. And then the other thing that's so important is that they are very connected, networked socially. They tend to see their family and friends very often, perhaps even on a daily basis. Sometimes they live in intergenerational a home where their grandparents are living with the parents and their children. They tend to cook together. They do their activities together. They maybe even grow their whatever vegetables or fruits they're growing. They may even work on that together. But the social ties with friends and family is very big in this part of the world. Obviously right now, under a pandemic and its restrictions, we can't do that as much as we like to, but that is very much a part of our culture as well. So let's keep that in mind. It's a really important or part of being very healthy. So the Mediterranean diet is focused on the countries that are around the Mediterranean Sea. And it's a regional sort of a approach because of the climate and because of the types of foods that can be grown there. And a little bit country specific in a way. And we'll touch base on that at the end of the program. So what does it look like to live this Mediterranean diet, which is known for being a heart healthy diet? And that's why we're talking about it today. It is healthy for the heart because of the foods, because of the physical activity, and because of the social ties. So a very typical Mediterranean breakfast is a very light breakfast. It's not the type of huge breakfast that we may see, at a restaurant or something like that. It's certainly not a big buffet type of a meal, but it's very, very light. And it may consist of bread or cereal, perhaps milk where it's available, or yogurt or something like that. It's not a very big meal. They focus on getting their bigger meal more in the middle of the day and some at the end of the day. So once they have that light breakfast, then they have a very long lunch. And this is really pretty much their main meal of the day. After that, there's a rest time, like a siesta time. And if you visited these parts of the world, you know that there is a time after lunch, and it could be a little bit of a later lunch, that there's a period of time when businesses shut down. This is typical. This is what they do all the time. And then they would open up later for a dinner, maybe 7 o'clock in the evening, and dinner could be very late. So there could be a nap included in that afternoon. They do get a lot of physical activity all along throughout the day, obviously, and they meet with various friends and family very often over their meals. They tend to eat a very rich plant-based diet. So that means that it's pretty nutrient rich for the most part. So not a lot of meat. You'll find that if you visited, you can say, wow, we really do eat a lot more meat in our country. We do. They don't. It's just not as common. Meat is used for a special meal, perhaps a holiday or an occasion. The food that they create is very easy. It's simple. It's much lighter um, in density than you would expect. In our country, we tend to make some of their foods a little bit more saucy and heavy, but usually the food is created very quickly, lots of fresh ingredients and lots of seasonings. So here we'd be talking about maybe fresh herbs that everybody seems to be growing on their front step in that part of the world. So what about the nutrients? What are we looking for to keep this heart of ours healthy? And that is obviously lots of fruits and vegetables. We need the fiber that comes along with them. But fruits and vegetables are very nutrient dense. And you can see the vitamins and minerals that are pretty common in most or many fruits and vegetables, depending on the ones you choose. And antioxidants are also part of many fruits and vegetables, especially some of your superfoods like cranberries, cherries, blueberries. And they tend to be obviously low in fat, salt, and calories. So if we're focusing on a meal that has 50% of our plate being fruits and vegetables, which is the recommendation by USDA, then we have very few calories on our plate, but we have nutrient dense foods. We have lots of vitamins and minerals going on there, lots of great natural flavors, lots of fiber without all the calories. And also, there's no cholesterol for the most part. There are very few fruits or vegetables actually that have very small amounts of cholesterol in them. But let's focus on getting half of that plate being fruits and vegetables. Variety is key for a few reasons. One, there are various nutrients in different colored fruits and vegetables that we eat. Some are more well known for certain properties than others, but the color of your plate, the textures that you enjoy when you're eating the food, the crunchiness maybe of some of the vegetables or some of the fruits. This is what makes that variety just so good and interesting when we go to eat our meal. So Mediterranean favorites include some of favorites that we have here in our country too. Unfortunately, we're not able to grow some of these because of our climate in the northeast part of the country. But you can see there are fruits there that you're very familiar with. And we have lots of access to. Even if dates, for example, are not grown here in our country, we have access to them in our supermarkets nearby. And what about the vegetables? These are the vegetables that you see that they tend to eat most of in other parts of the world. But we have these vegetables here too, right? We can get all of these vegetables fresh. Maybe we can't grow avocados, but we can certainly buy them in the supermarket. In fact, I think they've become so much more popular over the past number of years. I think people are realizing what we can do with something like that. So what about grains? Grains are part of our diet in our country, according to USDA. That would be a portion of your meal. It would not be half of your plate. It would be maybe a quarter of your plate. If you were looking at what are you going to put on this plate? Half fruits and vegetables, and then a quarter of it would be grains, and then the other portion would be your proteins. So what about grains? The people in the Mediterranean part of the world, they also have great access to barley and bulgur, and your farro. Farro is really well known over there, quinoa. Look at the foods here in the grains that are loaded with nutrients. And you can see the nutrients. We have a whole array of B vitamins and minerals and fiber that are great in these particular grains. In our country, our grains should be 50% of the grains that we consume in a day should be whole grains. So you need to look for labels that say that this is a whole grain food. And if you look at the list there, you can see that these are whole grain foods. They also have lots of protein and staying power. As Rachel mentioned, when you have foods with protein, they keep you full longer. So you're not going to be hungry very, very quickly. So let's talk about whole grain and the parts of the grain. And you may have heard this before, that your grain is made up of a few very basic parts. The outer layer would be the bran. Okay, that's where the fiber is in your grain, and that's where some of your B vitamins reside, the outer layer. And then the middle layer is your endosperm, and that's where you're going to find most of your carbs are going to be in that area. In the very small layer that's in this, it's not quite the center, but it sort of looks that way, is the germ. And the wheat germ, which I know you've heard of, that's where the nutrients are. That's the most nutrient rich part of a grain. So for example, if you purchase flour, all-purpose flour at a supermarket, you would be purchasing flour that is mainly made from the endosperm, the middle layer, which is very high in carbohydrates, which is good for your diet to some degree. But guess what they left out? They left out the bran and the germ, where most of the nutrients reside. So that's why you want to look for labels that say whole grain, because these are the most important parts of a grain. So some examples would be, your whole wheat product of pastas and breads, crackers, and so on. And oats, if you're a big fan of oatmeal, then look for a whole grain oat, which would be your old-fashioned oats. Anything that is like a quick oats and instant oat is going to be partially cooked, and it's actually going to be sliced and made a little bit thinner so that it sort of falls apart for the most part when you put it into milk or water or whatever. So look for whole grain products. And if you're looking for gluten-free, then we have a couple really good examples here: your quinoa, buckwheat, brown rice. These are all nutritious foods in their own right, but they are gluten-free. So keep that in mind. So there's a couple recipes. Well, actually, there's a lot of recipes that we have online, but quinoa is an important one because it has the protein in it. And we pair this in this particular recipe with roasted vegetables, and it can be a wonderful array of roasted vegetables. The picture you see has roasted broccoli and roasted carrots and roasted onion in it as well. But if you want to make this recipe, we don't have the link there, but we can share that with you. Then you're going to have protein, and you're going to have some crunch and lots of really great flavor. And guess what? Not a lot of fat and calories, and very little to no cholesterol. You may choose to drizzle a little bit olive oil on the top. And this makes a really great, you can call it a side dish, but you can also call it a meal. This is a great lunch. So let's talk about legumes. These are so important to our diet too, because this is where, especially in the Mediterranean part of the world, they get their protein. This is where it comes from. All different types of beans, and maybe they're chickpeas or lentils. Lentils are very popular in that part of the world. All different kinds of beans that you can experiment with that have protein in them. They don't necessarily have fat in them. They don't have cholesterol in them, and they don't have sodium. So if you're on a restricted diet and you want to go heart healthy, look at using more legumes in your diet. In fact, I was reading recently that some people are saying that a healthy diet would consider with some type of beans, legumes, every day. Just think about it. So what about legumes? We see them dried in the supermarket, and sometimes we say, oh, I'm not sure what to do with that. But there are ways, very easy ways to prepare dried beans. And I've been experimenting with this as well, and I don't have a video up on it yet on our recipes online, but I will soon. And that is a way to cook pretty much any kind of beans in your crock pot, and have, kind of drain them at the end, and then you can freeze them, and they do freeze very well. You can freeze them in portions that you might use. So we can show you that another time. We can point you to a recipe when we have one, but take a look or look online and see about how to cook dried beans. Usually you have to soak them before cooking. You can soak them overnight. That's a pretty efficient way to do it. Sometimes you can do a quick soak, which means you bring them to in a pot of water to a boil and let it sit, or let it simmer for a few minutes, and then let it sit, then drain it and use the beans. So canned beans are also a really good option. Don't be afraid of using them, but we will encourage you, whatever kind of beans you're using, 99% of the time, you want to rinse them, and you want to rinse them really well before you include them in a recipe. Canned beans are cooked, so they're ready to go. If you want to take chickpeas and drain them out really good in a colander, rinse them really well, you can add them into a pasta dish. It just makes it so easy, and it adds a little extra protein as well. So don't be afraid to use canned beans. Sometimes the prices are so good on them, and that's a great thing to keep in your pantry, either dried, canned, or both types of beans, because you can count on that protein source. They have a lot of fiber, and we already talked about the protein, but the fiber is really great in beans. And look at the vitamins and minerals too, and no fat, no cholesterol. This is what helps to make them heart healthy. So consider trying to incorporate more beans into maybe some of your favorite dishes. They go very well in various kinds of soup, or in pasta, as I said, and maybe even part of your salad. Have some sprinkled on a salad as well. This is one of my favorite recipes, and I made this last night. When it's cold outside and snowy, I feel like cooking when I can. So this recipe is very simple. Basically, I started with roasting butternut squash, which I did a few days earlier. And I'll just give you a little hint with butternut squash. You can roast it whole, which I have never done. I cut it in half lengthwise and put it on a pan and scoop out the seeds, because we're going to discard them. And then just take a few drops of olive oil and just kind of rub it over the flesh of the butternut squash. And you can bake them upside down. So you can flip them over so they're skin side up, or you can cook them right side up. It really doesn't matter. They take about, depending on the size, an hour and 15 minutes to roast. When you roast them that way, it's real quick and easy in terms of the preparation. And I'm saying that versus, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I have, trying to peel a butternut squash. Easier said than done. It has a very thick skin. And it's a lot to work with. And then cutting it into pieces is also very dense. So I think the easy way out is to roast it when it's cut in half. So roasting the butternut squash, setting it aside, in the refrigerator or the freezer for a couple of days is fine. And then your recipe that you'll see that we can link you to, just take some chicken stock or homemade vegetable stock or purchased vegetable stock and a can of tomatoes and 2 cups of red lentils, which cook very beautifully into a soup. They actually get very, very soft. This recipe is super nutritious. It's very easy. From the time to make the soup is no more than 30 minutes after you've roasted the butternut squash. And it's very nutrient dense. So it's going to keep you satisfied for a pretty long time before your next meal. So what about chickpeas? I don't know about you. I'm a big fan of chickpeas. I like them roasted. I've roasted them and experimented with that. Just rinsing them and adding them in a salad and in a soup, like I said before. But one of my favorite things to do with them is to make hummus. This hummus that you see the picture here is just a very, very simple hummus. It's just made with your can of chickpeas that have been rinsed very well and drained. A little bit of olive oil, I'm talking about maybe 2 to 3 tablespoons of olive oil, a clove of garlic or more, depending on how much punch you want to add to your hummus, and salt and pepper. You can think about adding tahini. I don't add tahini. I did several years ago when I started making hummus, but you don't have to. This comes out so good. It's super simple, and you have a very high protein. You could use it for a snack, like you see here with a dip. My favorite way is to put it on some homemade bread with maybe some roasted peppers and spinach or arugula. And oh my goodness, what a great sandwich. There are lots of variations on making hummus. And if you check out our recipes online, you'll see several different kinds. So let's talk about fat, because fat is an important part of our diet. The key is making sure they're healthy fats. We're talking about olive oil, canola oil, peanut oil. The monounsaturated fats are the ones that are best for your body. As Rachel said earlier, a fat that becomes hard at room temperature or firm, like butter, like animal fat, are saturated fats. Not so good for your body. To be heart healthy, we need to reduce the use of saturated fats as much as possible and work on healthy fats. So try to focus on, and if you haven't used olive oil in the past, give it a try. Canola oil is a great combination vegetable oil. And you can use these for lots of different things. You can, I would use olive oil, maybe to a good quality olive oil to drizzle on top of something like a salad or a finished dish. And that is very popular in some of the countries in the Mediterranean area. They use olive oil and they very often just drizzle a little on top of the finished dish. Okay, another big favorite, herbs. Herbs are so easy to grow. We can grow them here in our country. But what's interesting about herbs is they are loaded with micronutrients. Yes, there's nutrition in herbs, and you can grow these on your front step, your back step, a sunny window, maybe your deck. You don't need to have them in the ground. They grow very easily in a simple pot. So when we get a few months down the road here and we're able to go out and buy some plants, then think about getting an outdoor pot and putting a couple of different herbs in it with a nice quality soil, and give it some water on a regular basis, and you will be so surprised at the benefits. You'll have these nice, beautiful, fresh tasting herbs that you can use. And that's basically what I do. I love making pesto, and I love making mixed herb pesto. This is a basil pesto. You're looking at basil in the picture, but don't be afraid to add some other herbs. Most kinds of mint work very well in pesto. Lemon balm works very well. Parsley, chives. Oh my goodness, you can have so much fun just putting lots of different herbs in, maybe a little bit of garlic or a lot of garlic if you like it, and some olive oil, and do this in a small food processor, and you can freeze these amounts for later, which is very easy to do, and it does last a long time in the freezer. Be sure to use a freezer quality Ziploc bag or something. And then you can stir some of this into your soup down the road when you're making something, or toss it in pasta, add it to a salad. The varieties are endless, you know, what you can do with some very simply made pesto. So minestrone soup. Now, of course, that sounds like it comes from Italy, correct? And it does pretty much. It's a tomato-based product. Tomatoes are very nutritious, and so are the vegetables and the beans that very often are stirred into a minestrone soup. Minestrone doesn't have to be really difficult to make. You may find some recipes that have like 15 or 20 ingredients. It doesn't have to be quite that complicated. You can take a look at the recipe that we have online. But a minestrone basically, for the most part, does not have meat in it. Typically, you can put some meat in it if you like, but if you want to make it really heart healthy, stick with lots of different vegetables, some really great legumes, maybe stir in some spinach or arugula at the end, and you have a wonderful meal that has super nutrients in it. So we actually have a whole program on this part, but we'll just talk about it just to give you some idea. There are some pockets of the world that are known to be, have people who live to 100 years old, very, very healthy, 100 plus years old. They have a lot of centenarians. So these are the countries you can see here at the top. Ikaria, Greece, they are known because they have very little dementia in their country, and people do not die at a young age, so they live a little bit longer. In Okinawa, they have the highest life expectancy rates in the world. So what can we learn from them? We need to take a look at that, and we need to try to do some of those practices. But the Mediterranean diet really is really very much like all of what these countries are eating and these parts of the world. Sardinia, they have more people over 100 per capita than in the US. And in Costa Rica, very low rates of heart disease. And there also, a lot of the research says that they tend to be a very happy country. So that means a lot, right? Right here in our own country, in Loma Linda, California, they have the lowest rates of heart disease and diabetes and obesity in our country. Now we're trying to kind of spread that kind of thinking a little bit more, but it's a very healthy diet that they eat. Many of the people in this particular community tend to be vegetarians, and we're not promoting that you be a vegetarian, but they eat a very vegetable, whole grain rich diet. They drink lots of water, they get a lot of physical activity, and they're also very connected socially. So take a look at that, look it up. Some of the foods you can use to kind of like spice up your food or give it some fresh flavor. And it's very common in the Mediterranean region to be growing lemons. Oranges grow very well there too. So lemons, usually just a squeeze of lemon juice on top of your dish is really common, and it gives it lots of flavor. The honey that they use in this part of the world is usually a very dark honey, and yes, they use it in their coffee as well as their tea. Spices and herbs, as you can see, turmeric, garlic, rosemary, mint, are very common. We can grow most of these right here on our steps at home. I'm not too sure about turmeric. You can grow garlic, but you would need to be growing that in soil. But if you want to grow rosemary, mint, and some of the other herbs, they're very easy to grow. They use olive oil, so there's a good tip. Especially in Okinawa, they use tofu because it has great protein and low cholesterol. They stick with very high fiber foods that are also very nutrient rich. So sweet potatoes and beans are very common in all these parts of the world. Mushrooms, another one that can be added that has some immune protecting properties to it. Fish, twice a week. Yes, salmon is very rich in omega-3 fatty acids, and we talk about that a lot. But keep in mind that there are lots of other fish that we can eat that is very healthy for us. Think about sea bass or local bass or flounder and even some of the shellfishes. But of course, we keep some of those in moderation. More fruits and vegetables. Lots and lots of fruits and vegetables. They're very common in the healthy parts of the world for so many good reasons. And it's not just because they taste good. It's also really common in some of these countries that they cook their meals together. So you may be thinking, oh, okay, we do that during a holiday time. Some of these families cook their meals together several times a week. And so that's working together. That's learning from each other, learning from the different generations. But those social ties really help with better brain function, keeps us more alert, keeps us learning, gives our exercise to the brain. There's also lots of reasons that are good for children and families, and we have there's lots of research done on this, and you've heard this before probably, on lower rates of teen pregnancy, depression, substance abuse among children in the families, a higher sense of self-esteem, and less eating disorders.
We're supposed to get something tonight, flurries, but nothing.
Somebody turn off their, thank you. Okay, so what does the Mediterranean?
Oh no, I go to them.
What does the Mediterranean diet say? It says eat less of these foods. Red meat, there you go. So you're going to have maybe more beans in your diet, or maybe we're not saying don't ever eat it. We're just saying eat less of it. They're going to have less diets that are super high in sugar and fat. They are not eating very much, if at all, highly processed foods. They pretty much make all of their food from scratch, and they make it with fresh ingredients. And they also avoid very highly sweetened beverages. Be active. We've been talking about that a lot for so many good reasons. Yes, it can help you control your weight and your risk of heart disease, diabetes, various kinds of cancer. It helps your mental health. Take a walk, to be active. It helps you to reduce your stress and keep your muscles really, really strong. So for more information, there's lots of websites you can take a look at. But we can take some questions, Rachel.